Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen and I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. Today I'm going to be talking to you about some myths regarding traditional publishing. As recently as last week I saw someone talking about this who'd never been traditionally published, and yet they were certain they had all of the answers, which were in fact not true. They're all myths, so I'm going to debunk some of them. The first myth is that even if you get an agent and then a publisher, it can take years, 3 or more, for your book to turn up on the shelves. This is a myth. Most of the time it takes a year. Quite often it depends upon the book. It depends upon the author, if there's someone who's really good at revising and editing, if they have the time to do it, to fit it in around everything else that goes on in their life. It depends upon the publisher. In my case, with my debut book, I was picked up in 2013, but my debut didn't come out until 2015. That is because I spent a year working on the book with my agent. Then when we took it to Orbit Books, who picked it up, it then took another year, even though the book was in quite good condition. The reason for this is they gave me longer up front to work on books 2 and 3, so that when the first book came out in September 2015, the second book could come out 6 months later, and the third book 6 months after that. You know yourself, when you pick up a debut book from a new author in the first in a series, you think, oh brilliant, when's the next one? In a year's time. You think, well, okay, I'll try and remember. But with so much going on in the market, so many other books, you can kind of forget about it and just slips your mind. But if it's every 6 months, that's a bit better. So that's why it took me a bit longer. But every time you see a book deal on the news, on Twitter, on social media, anywhere, it will say, so-and-so has picked up this book, it will debut in this date. So you can see straight away that when the book is coming out. So it's a myth that it'll take 3 years or more. That's just not true. The second myth that I saw is that it can take up to a decade for a single book to be traditionally published. That's just not true again either. Connected to what I've just said, it might take you 10 years of submitting multiple books to be picked up. But there again, if the books aren't of good enough quality, and the people who are testing the quality are the agents and then the editors and the publishers and other people within the business, because it's not just the editors, remember. Even if your agent loves the book and they take it to a publisher, the editor is the person who makes the decision. However, they have to then sell that book internally to finance, marketing and other parts of the business. The fact you're saying your one book could take 10 years to be traditionally published is just nonsense. I don't know where people come up with these kind of things, but it's just not true. So don't listen to it. The third myth I saw was you sign over royalties. Okay, this just shows a complete lack of how the finance works to do with traditional publishing. So I'm going to break it down and explain it to you from my experience as someone who's actually been traditionally published. When you work with an agent, you send off your book to, half a dozen agents, and if someone says, yes, I like your book, I want to work with you on that book, you do not pay the agent. As a traditionally published author, all of the money flows from other people to you. I worked with my agent for over a year, and in that period I didn't pay her a single penny. We revised it based upon her feedback, back and forth, meetings, phone calls, emails. I gave her no money at all. Once the book is ready, you then take it to a publisher. They will then make you an offer, and as part of the contract, the publisher takes some money because they have to get paid. Your agent then gets some money. They take a percentage of the advance, which is the money you are given by the publisher, and they take a percentage of the royalties. You don't sign them over. This is industry standard practice. Here's the other thing people don't talk about. Say you take your book to an agent and they love it and they champion it and think it's brilliant and they try and sell it in the market. It may not sell. So you could have spent a couple of years working with this agent and the book does not go anywhere. If you want a specific example, I recently did an interview with Andrea Stewart. Her debut novel, The Bone Shard Daughter, has just come out. That was the third novel, I think she said, you can check the interview, that she spent working with her current agent. The first two, for many reasons, just didn't go anywhere. So she worked with this agent, I'm going to guess for at least 3 years, on 3 books. She didn't pay the agent at all during that time. The agent was doing it for free. When you get the publisher, you get an advance. This is the money that they parcel out. So let's say you do a trilogy of books and you get 100 grand advance. You don't get all of that up front. You get it split into the 3 books. You get a chunk up front for when you sign the contract. Your agent will take a percentage of that. And then you get like another chunk of that third when you get to a certain point, maybe a second draft, and then on the day of publication, you get the third chunk of a third, typically. And your agent takes a percentage of that. It's all part of the contract, it's all written in there. Royalties. You only get royalties when you earn out. This is another bit of industry jargon. That means, let's start with, let's say the 100,000 I talked about. You have to make £100,000, dollars, whatever, of sales of books, clear all of that your money you've been given by the publisher. If you don't, there are no royalties. You don't have to pay the publisher back. You don't have to, if you don't earn out, you don't give them any of the money back. That's not how it works. That money is yours to keep. They took a risk, they took a gamble on you and the book, and that's how advances work. So let's say you sell 200,000, 400,000 copies of your books, whatever. You've earned out that 100 grand. Every sale thereafter, you get a percentage of the cover price. It's in the contract, it's all part and standard. Let's say for every book that costs £10, you get £1. That's a royalty. Your agent then gets a percentage of that royalty. If you don't earn out, you don't make any royalties, they don't get any additional money beyond the advance that you had from the publisher. I don't know what nonsense people have been saying about royalties and stuff, but that's it explained very precisely. There's more detail to it but those are the basics. The next myth that I've been hearing is that you sign over TV and adaptation rights. This is a myth. I know probably 100 traditionally published authors and none of them, 0, have signed over film and TV and adaptation rights. It's not true. This is a myth. What typically happens is when you sign a contract with a publisher, it'll say something like UK and Commonwealth English rights or worldwide English rights. What that means is that named publisher in the contract can publish your book or trilogy of books, whatever it is in the contract, anywhere in the world in English only. If anybody else wants to publish it in another language, they have to do a separate contract and negotiate that with your agent. So for example, my books are published in French, German and Russian, my first trilogy. There's a separate contract for each of them. There again there's an advance, there again there are royalties, and that's just up to that publisher to publish it in French, German, Russian, wherever they can sell the books in those languages. No point in any of the contracts has it got adaptation rights. So that's a myth. Don't listen to that. The next myth is that advances are awful these days. That's not really true either. So, there are a lot more science fiction and fantasy and every genre books published these days than there were in the good old days. And I'm saying good old days to refer to maybe the 80s and the very early 90s. These days, you're not going to have massive parties and launch parties for your book because the publisher doesn't have that kind of money these days. They just don't because there's so many other books, and if they blew all of that budget on one, then what about all of the others? So they have to be more careful with their budgets. However, advances, go onto any Twitter thing, go on social media, go onto the bookseller and look up the deals, and you'll see some very good deals. It might say a 6-figure sum for this trilogy. You can work out what it is. I've just explained it before. It's 100 grand. It might say a very good 6-figure deal, and there again, that might be 200,000, that'd be 300,000. We don't know, but that's between the individual and the agent and the publisher. That's still pretty good money. Bigger publishers can offer bigger deals. Then you get auctions for some books that are picked up by other international territories, like I've just explained, or France, Germany, Spain, Russia, whatever. All these other people could make bids and they're separate contracts. So advances are quite good. They're not brilliant in some cases, but it really depends upon the book, the genre, the publisher, the overall deal that's negotiated by your agent. It really depends on many factors. Here's the other thing. Whether you're self-published or traditionally published, the majority of authors in both spaces, I'm going to say 90-95%, work for a living as well. They have full or part-time jobs. The named people, those who've made it big in particular genres, they're the tip of the spear. Under them are hundreds, possibly thousands of other authors who have made deals, have self-published or traditionally published, and have advances and royalties, but They make some money, not enough for full income. You can build that up over your career by doing more books, and then maybe you can create enough of an income to sustain yourself. But advances are reasonable these days in so many factors. Just point blank saying they're awful these days is a myth. A final note, if you're going to self-publish your book, then this shouldn't be a fallback because you were rejected when you tried to be traditionally published. Being self-published means doing so many more things. On top of all the things I've talked about, there's all of the money that you flow out this time. As a self-published person, you're a business person. You will pay an editor, cover designer, proofreader, and so on. All of the money goes from you out to all these people who are professionals, and you run it as a business. But it shouldn't be just because you got rejected. I got rejected many times before I was published because the books were rubbish. They just weren't up to standard. Being self-published is a completely different experience. You should make the choice for yourself, knowing both options. A friend of mine has been self-published. He had a brand new book, he worked on it a bit, then he had some interest from some agents, and then from discussions with them, he realised that he actually wants still to self-publish it because he'd done so much of it, he had a very clear vision of it, of his mind. He'd had the book edited, he'd already got a title, he'd already just had some work designed on the cover, and he wanted to control these aspects himself. And he'd learnt so much from all of his previous self-published books that it just made sense to him to take it forward. So don't think that traditional publishing is awful and you must self-publish because you can't get a traditional publishing deal. It's just another myth. People are scaremongering you. Both of them have their challenges. Both of them have their advantages. They're just different. One is no better than the other. So make the choice for yourself. Get informed information from the right people. Don't listen to weird myths online. That's it for today. I'll be back soon with another video.